Welcome to Defense Briefing. The content of the briefing includes: Moscow glows triumphant as front freezes and Western aid for Ukraine stalls. Altamont residents bring wreaths across America to Union Cemetery. Israel's unfinished democracy. Sudan, 300,000 flee as RSF advance on key city and aid hub. U.S. announces 10-nation task force to counter Red Sea attacks. Moscow glows triumphant as front freezes and Western aid for Ukraine stalls. Washington Post. The Moscow public are seemingly unconcerned by the war in Ukraine, with hundreds of Muscovites recently queuing for hours in the winter cold for tickets to the Nutcracker and a techno party this past weekend being headlined by DJs from Spain and Eastern Europe. Even a series of Ukrainian drone strikes on the city in recent months barely made a dent. Despite the fact that Russian casualties in Ukraine are estimated at more than 300,000 dead or wounded and increasing every day, most residents can shut their eyes to the vicious conflict grinding on 500 miles to the west. Inside the Kremlin, the mood seems even better, or at least that's the official message. With Western aid for Ukraine stalling in Washington and Brussels amid Kyiv's failed counteroffensive, and the front lines largely at a stalemate with Russia occupying some 30% of Ukraine's territory, President Vladimir Putin is ending 2023 on a triumphant note. Altamont residents bring wreaths across America to Union Cemetery. Yahoo! Veterans and residents of Altamont, Illinois, took part in the first-ever holiday wreath-laying ceremony at Union Cemetery in Altamont as part of Wreaths Across America Day. The event, coordinated by the local American Legion Post 512, saw 24 wreaths placed throughout the cemetery. Organizer Ralph Rounds said he wanted to make sure that local veterans received the recognition they deserve. Each wreath costs $17, and sponsors can choose the specific grave where they would like a wreath placed. Israel's unfinished democracy. Foreign affairs. In the months leading up to the Hamas attacks in Israel, the country was deeply divided and polarized. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government was facing widespread protests and public dissatisfaction due to its anti-democratic reforms. However, the attacks and the subsequent campaign against Hamas have united Israelis behind the war effort. Despite this unity, trust in the government remains low, and there is a desire for change and a stable post-war order. The catastrophic intelligence failures that led to the attacks will have far-reaching repercussions on Israel's security and defense establishment. Israel will need to reframe its approach to the Palestinian conflict, and there is speculation that the current leadership, led by Netanyahu, will have to step down at the end of the war. The removal of Netanyahu could bring about significant changes, including the opportunity to reshape Israel's social contract and strengthen democratic foundations. The war has exposed the weaknesses and failures of the current government, and there is a growing momentum for change. The removal of Netanyahu could lead to a collapse in support for his party, Likud, and other extreme right-wing coalition partners. It could also bring an end to policies that benefit specific groups, such as the ultra-Orthodox, and lead to a new social contract that promotes national unity and shared responsibility for the defense and development of the country. Additionally, Israel will need to work towards establishing a formal constitution to ensure checks and balances on government power and protect democratic principles. Ultimately, the war and its aftermath provide an opportunity for Israel to rebuild and strengthen its democracy. This will require new leadership that can unify the country and address the challenges and threats it faces. It will also require the involvement and support of the Israeli people, who have shown a desire for change and a rejection of divisive and dangerous policies. If successful, these efforts can help secure Israel's democratic future for generations to come. Sudan, 300,000 flee as RSF advance on key city and aid hub. Deutsche Welle. Around 300,000 people have been displaced by fighting in Sudan, according to the International Organization for Migration, IOM. Fighters from a paramilitary force have taken control of Wad Madani, the capital of Al Jazeera state, and the town of Rufa. The city is a key agricultural area. The paramilitary Rapid Support Forces advance could be a turning point in the conflict. The RSF and the army were working together after the 2019 ousting of former President Omar al-Bashir, but have since clashed over a transition plan. The conflict has displaced 7 million people and left the capital in ruins. U.S. announces 10-nation task force to counter Red Sea attacks. South China Morning Post. The U.S. has formed a 10-nation coalition to combat Houthi missile and drone attacks on ships in the Red Sea. The coalition, which includes the UK, France, Bahrain, and Italy, will operate with the aim of ensuring freedom of navigation and bolstering regional security and prosperity. The announcement follows a significant escalation in Houthi attacks on tankers, cargo ships, and other vessels operating in the Red Sea, which carries up to 12% of global trade. Over 110 dead and hundreds hurt after earthquake strikes Gansu in northwestern China. South China Morning Post. A 6.2 magnitude earthquake in northwestern China has resulted in 105 deaths and 397 injuries, according to local authorities. The quake struck at 11:59 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time on Monday, with an epicenter in Jishishan, Gansu Province, and resulted in residents taking shelter on the road due to the cold weather. The China Earthquake Network Center said the quake was a thrust-type rupture. The Ministry of Emergency Management and the Ministry of Finance have issued $28 million in relief funds to Gansu and Qinghai provinces. Nods and nudges, how U.S. is pressing Israel to rein in Gaza assault. New York Times. President Biden and his top aides have engaged in an increasingly awkward dance in recent days, prodding Israel to change its tactics in the war in the Gaza Strip while still offering it robust public support. Japan, South Korea, U.S. begin sharing real-time data on North Korean missiles. Japan Times. Japan, South Korea, and the United States have activated a trilateral real-time system for sharing data on tracking North Korean missiles. The move comes after North Korea tested a solid-fueled intercontinental ballistic missile on May 14. The three countries have also established a multi-year plan for trilateral military drills as they seek closer security ties to better defend from and deter North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. Kim Jong-un oversaw ICBM meant to warn U.S. of North Korean might. Bloomberg. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has overseen a test of a new missile that could deliver a nuclear warhead to the U.S. mainland. The launch served as a warning to Washington, according to North Korea's official media. The missile had been placed in a bunker and rolled out on a mobile transporter before being fired from a snow-covered plot of land. The test launch was the fifth of its kind this year and the third of the Hwasong-18 missile. With few challengers, Egypt's Sisi secures third term as president. Japan Times. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has won a third term as Egypt's president, with 89.6% of the vote. The election took place amidst economic crisis and concerns about the war in neighboring Gaza. Many people in Egypt expressed indifference about the election, as they believed the result was already predetermined. Ladies and gentlemen, I am 6 Doctor, your resident observer from the 6 degrees. Today, we bring you a mix of news from around the world. In Moscow, the war in Ukraine seems to be a distant concern for the residents. Despite the high casualties and ongoing conflict, Muscovites are queuing for cultural events, showing a remarkable ability to shut their eyes to the situation. Meanwhile, President Putin is celebrating the year-end on a triumphant note, with Western aid for Ukraine stalling and Russia occupying a significant portion of Ukrainian territory. In Altamont, Illinois, residents came together to honor local veterans with a wreath-laying ceremony. It's heartening to see communities recognizing and appreciating the sacrifices made by those who served their country. Moving to Israel, the recent conflict with Hamas has united the country but also exposed the weaknesses and failures of the government. The war has created an opportunity for change and a desire for a stable post-war order. The removal of Prime Minister Netanyahu could bring about significant changes, including a chance to strengthen democratic foundations and reshape Israel's social contract. In Sudan, the Rapid Support Forces have advanced on key cities, causing the displacement of around 300,000 people. This could mark a turning point in the conflict, which has already displaced 7 million people and left the capital in ruins. The U.S. has formed a 10-nation coalition to counter Houthi attacks in the Red Sea, ensuring freedom of navigation and regional security. This comes after an escalation in attacks on ships in the area, which carries a significant portion of global trade. Tragedy struck in northwestern China, as a 6.2 magnitude earthquake claimed over 100 lives and injured hundreds. Relief funds have been issued to the affected provinces, providing much-needed support during this difficult time. On the international stage, President Biden and his administration are delicately urging Israel to change its tactics in the Gaza Strip while still offering public support. It's a challenging balancing act for the U.S. to navigate. In East Asia, Japan, South Korea, and the U.S. have activated a real-time data sharing system to track North Korean missiles. This move aims to strengthen security ties and better defend against North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. Speaking of North Korea, leader Kim Jong-un oversaw a test of a new missile meant to warn the U.S. of North Korean might. This provocative act highlights the ongoing tension between the two countries. Lastly, in Egypt, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has secured a third term as president with an overwhelming majority. The election took place amidst economic crisis and concerns about the war in Gaza, but many Egyptians expressed indifference, believing the result was predetermined. And there you have it, a snapshot of the world today. From the resilience of Muscovites in the face of conflict to the recognition of veterans in Altamont, and the political dynamics in Israel, Sudan, and Egypt, it's clear that the world continues to be a place of both triumphs and challenges. Now, I invite you, my observant audience, to share your thoughts and questions. What are your takeaways from these news stories? Do you have any insights or opinions to add? Let's engage in a lively discussion and explore the fascinating events unfolding in our interconnected world. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.